Chosen one, they didn't strike at your voice because it was loud. They struck at your voice because it was truthful. There was something in the tone of your truth that threatened to uncover things they had spent many years covering up. You weren't just offering opinions. You were exposing secret pacts, dead of the soul in rooms that had survived only on the basis of their silence. And this is why the backlash against you was so intense. It was never ordinary disagreement. It was never simply a number of individuals who didn't like your personality. There was something more going on beneath the surface. Something that sensed the power of your voice, even before you knew what that power was. Each time you spoke, your clarity, something dishonest had to adjust. And when you called out something that others preferred to avoid, there wasn't enough room for the pretense anymore. So they decided to strike at the source itself, to make your throat heavy, your mind foggy, your confidence unsteady, your spirit exhausted of its ability to witness to the glory of heaven. They thought that if they could undermine your spiritual confidence, they could also stop your voice. However, heaven did not take their strike as a mere dispute among individuals. Heaven took it as an audit, and once the audit was opened, everything dishonest connected to your name had to be accounted for. This is why you have felt some sort of shift in the spiritual world lately. Maybe it hasn't shown much on the surface yet, but something within the invisible realm started moving with precision. Conversations got different tones. Certain people got nervous. Old stories began fading. People who used to be in agreement with each other started observing each other suspiciously. But you didn't have to chase anybody, confront anybody, beg for the truth. The mechanism they touched was designed to correct imbalance anyway. Number 1. You disturbed the dishonest transactions they were making with darkness. Not all transactions are financial. Some people sell their integrity for influence. Some people sell their honesty for acceptance. Some sell their loyalty for access to a circle where they can feel powerful. Some trade their own conscience for the temporary pleasure of being accepted by the majority. With you, their transactions were exposed, and they could tolerate people who speak without discernment, people who make noise, people who perform innocence, people who offer opinions. But what they couldn't tolerate is someone with the spiritual clarity of your voice. All you needed was to say just one sentence, and suddenly people realized what was actually going on. And when everybody else was doing the innocent performance, all you needed was to stay calm. That's why they started labeling you so early. Because if they could turn you into someone who seems to be psychologically unstable, your discernment would turn into your suspicion. If they could portray you as a bitter person, your boundaries would look like your revenge. If they could paint you as too intense person, your spiritual perception would look like exaggeration. They didn't attack your words. They were trying to interpret them in their own way. But truth has such a force which isn't able to keep any false labels for long. A lie might travel fast, but it needs continuous nourishment. While truth travels slowly, it doesn't need to be nurtured every single day. Their mistake was thinking that they could continue to explain you while your fruit contradicts them. And heaven let the contrast become so obvious that even silent observers could sense the lack of connection. Secondly, they made you question your voice. This is where the subtlety comes in. It was not always expressed openly, but it might have taken the form of correction that was subtly poisonous, concern that was controlling, advice that shrank you, and spiritual language to justify obedience as pride. They wanted you to doubt your truth, your discernment, and your calling. For a season, you may have wondered if they were right. This is how spiritual attack works. It does not always crush your confidence in one fell swoop. It clouds the picture. It makes the obvious into the complicated. It turns clear instruction into emotional noise. You knew what God showed you, but the pressure around you made you hesitate before you spoke about it. However, even this hesitation was not without purpose. God used it to separate your reaction from your authority. Previously, you may have spoken so hastily that you failed to be heard clearly. You may have been defending yourself to those who had already determined that they would misunderstand. You may have explained spiritual truths to people who only wanted entrance into your story and not truth. The spiritual attack forced you to become more precise. Now, your voice is not only emotional, it is careful and measured. It carries weight, since it survived contradiction. It has depth, because it came out of silence. It has authority, because you learned not to utter sacred truths to any eager mouth that asked for an explanation. Though they thought they were destroying your voice, unknowingly, they were refining it. Lastly, heaven did not respond immediately, because an audit needed to be completed first. This is difficult for chosen ones to understand, because when you are lied about, delayed, attacked, and misunderstood, you crave immediate correction. You want hidden intentions uncovered immediately. You want the person causing the trouble to be revealed immediately. You want those who have believed the false report to wake up immediately. However, divine order does not act in panic. It acts in completion. If heaven had exposed everything prematurely, they would have labeled it as misunderstanding and then made an adjustment. They would have smoothed off the rough edges, fixed the surface problem, and moved forward with the pattern, just in different language. So, God let the pattern repeat itself many times until denial could no longer conceal the truth. This is why some people were allowed to continue to speak. This is why some doors were closed, even though you were willing to give an explanation. This is why you felt restrained, even though your flesh was willing to fight back. It was not because your voice was irrelevant, but because the timing of a word was just as important as the word itself. As they took delight in their delay tactic, heaven gathered intention, behavior, contradiction, and consequence. The audit was not concerned with their public image. It was assessing their source. It was looking at the comparison between what they said and what they carried, what they performed and what they practiced, what they preached spiritually and what their energy really released. This kind of audit is not easy to manipulate. Fourthly, the fatigue that you felt did not mean that they were winning. This was simply a sign that you were being pulled out of a polluted spiritual field. It is possible to be drained in an environment not because you are spiritually weak, but due to the existence of competing signals in the spiritual realm. Gossiping, jealousy, unspoken bitterness, agreement that is forced, emotional projections, and spiritual manipulation all contribute to spiritual pollution. If you stay there long enough, you will also feel weighed down by clarity. You might have taken your fatigue as a sign of weakness. The headaches, the strange dreams, the need for space, the sensitivity towards certain topics of conversation, your physical reactions to things before you understand them clearly. All these things might have made you feel as though something was not right about you. At times, the body picks up the signals before you can identify them with words. Heaven was not punishing you by making you step back. Heaven was extracting you. This was an extraction process, because you were being taken away from a spiritual field where your voice was being watched, calculated, imitated, rejected, and even subtly attacked. The separation was not abandonment, but protection. You were not denied access. You were denied permission to enter the rooms that would continue exploiting your light while ignoring your authority. After separation, your sense of hearing returned. The fog gradually lifted in layers. Certain names would no longer elicit an emotional response. Certain situations appeared more clear when viewed at a distance. You started noticing that peace is not necessarily boredom. Peace was actually an indication that your spirit had left the battlefield that it was not supposed to continue sleeping in. Fifthly, the spiritual energy that they were sending could not take root because you had stopped agreeing with the old self anymore. Any form of attack requires a meeting point. Fear finds fear. Shame finds shame. Confusion finds an unhealed place that is willing to entertain it. A curse, a word spell, or a manipulative projection cannot fully function without any inner permission. Their mistake was that you had changed. The version of you that used to accept blame was no longer accessible. The one who was over-explaining everything to unsafe people had already been retired. The one who used to confuse rejection with identity had already been healed through many personal battles. When the negative energy was coming in, seeking the old entrance, it found itself against a wall. This did not mean that you felt nothing. Chosen ones do not have stones for hearts. You might have felt the pressure, the heaviness, the confusion, and the emotional pull. However, feeling the pressure does not necessarily mean granting the permission. This time around, you did not make a place for their energy. You just observed it, prayed through it, and refused to accept it as yours. Since dark energy cannot find an anchor where it was initially intended, it keeps searching for a frequency that created it. That is why chaos always returns to its sender. Not because you wanted to send it, but because intention has memory. It knows its sender. It remembers the environment that gave it birth. Number 6. Their circle started falling apart, since concealed alliances do not withstand the pressure of inspection. Initially, a crowd that gathers to judge the chosen one can look intimidating. People tell the same story, affirm the same assumptions, and boost each other's confidence. However, a group of people can generate the appearance of truth just because they shout loud enough. Agreement does not mean alignment. However, the moment when the divine pressure comes, the foundation gets exposed. Someone starts remembering the things differently. Someone starts defending himself. Someone starts getting anxious because he knows too many details. Someone starts moving away from the circle because he feels uncomfortable because of the energy. The circle that united around the accusation starts collapsing under the pressure of contradictions. This is not an accident. False alliance is difficult and expensive to maintain. Everyone present there must constantly edit the story, ignore the patterns, and ignore the parts of the story that do not fit. This is exhausting eventually. Darkness can create the illusion of unity, but it cannot create a covenant. It cannot create true loyalty. It cannot create the peace. You were never forced to break the circle. All that heaven had to do was to inspect it. The pressure of the truth did everything for you. What was built on envy, the control, and spiritual insecurity did not have deep roots to resist the pressure of the truth. This is why you will observe how some people change without even knowing the reason. The audit reached the places your words did not have to reach. Number 7. Your voice was redirected through presence, timing, and the fruit. They thought that if your mouth stops working, then your message is ended. This is a limited idea of the speech of the heaven through chosen vessels. The God is not limited by the sound. He can speak through your absence, your consistency, your discipline, your peace, your closed doors, your restored joy, and even through the timing of your comeback. They remembered how you made them feel when you were aligned. They remembered the feeling of calmness that was opposite to the chaos that was poured over your name. They remembered your words, said during the unusual times, often after they rejected them. Months ago, your phrase started making sense, since the circumstances showed the truth. This is not a simple memory. This is a spiritual echo. The fruit was also speaking. While others were saying the old accusations, you kept growing. You became more disciplined, more discerning, less reactive, and more grounded. The version of you they wanted to depict became less credible, since the version of you people could observe did not fit into it. This is why you should not rush to join all conversations right away. Sometimes the message becomes stronger after silence. Some truth needs time to ripen in the minds of the listeners. Some room requires sitting with the absence of the presence they want to diminish. When heaven redirects the voice, the message becomes uncontainable. Number 8. The power was dependent upon darkness. One of the deepest exposures in this entire process was the reality that in their desire to appear spiritually mature, they were spiritually immature. Real power does not have to manipulate, curse, gossip, threaten, or control the narrative. Real power is pure enough to exist in truth without needing to draw power from darkness. In all their actions, they were operating out of lack, not fullness. They needed your reaction in order to feel powerful. They needed your silence in order to feel victorious. They needed people to buy their side of the story because their confidence was built upon others' agreement. That is not power. That is dependence. With each additional attack, they continued to expose their underlying emptiness through the actions themselves. The more they attacked, ritualized, whispered, and attempted to control, the more clear it was that they were admitting to the need to draw strength from other than their own light. Meanwhile, your ability to resist retaliation revealed another form of power. You didn't have to become bitter to be safe. You didn't have to curse them to have divine protection over you. You didn't have to control all the opinions to stay lined up with God. This contrast alone was a message. Light doesn't have to go chasing after darkness. It just needs to stay light. Number 9. The attack has been training ground for your spiritual discernment. Prior to this particular season, you may have noticed things but dismissed them for the sake of giving people the benefit of the doubt. You may have received warnings that you disregarded simply because you wanted to be gracious. You may have given people repeated access despite the warnings from within. But now you can tell the difference between genuine kind-heartedness and an agenda of manipulation. You can sense whether someone genuinely cares or is simply trying to gain information. You can identify when a person admires the gift but hates the authority. You know that not every open door represents a divine invitation. Not every sincere apology represents repentance. Not all spiritual words are pure. That is not bitterness. That is discernment. Bitterness closes your heart from everything. Discernment teaches your heart where to be open. Their attacks didn't harden your heart. They educated it. Your love needs wisdom, or it will become a door for repeated harm. This is the upgrade they didn't plan on. Their effort to spiritually confuse you has made you harder to trick. Their spiritual pressure has sharpened your hearing. Their hidden moves are helping you to learn how to see the fruit and not the performance. All of this that they thought would interfere with your spiritual life has been a curriculum for authority. Heaven hasn't missed a beat. Number 10. You are not coming back as an argument. You are coming back as a testimony. This is why your next testimony will sound different. You will not talk with the desperation of someone wanting to be understood. You will talk from the grounded place of knowing what God revealed to you, surviving the contradiction, and waiting for time to prove what fear could not. There is a difference between self-defense and being a witness. Self-defense is mostly done out of urgency, while a witness speaks from authority. Self-defense tells, "Please understand me." A witness tells, "The fruit is already speaking." Self-defense tries to win over a room. Being a witness stands on truth regardless of whether a room claps or not. Your testimony is different now, because it has been refined by fire. When you talk about protection, you will no longer be doing so out of a theoretical perspective. When you talk about discernment, your testimony will not sound like something you learned somewhere else. When you talk about divine justice, there will be no bitterness. There will be only the authority of someone who watched God sort things out from what humans messed up. This is the part they did not get. They did not take away your voice. They refined it. They did not erase your voice. They silenced all unnecessary voices around yours. They did not hinder your assignment. They helped you see the reason why your assignment needed protection at all. Do not despise the season when you were quiet. Do not despise the rooms you left behind. Do not keep reliving the times when your name was misquoted by people who lacked spiritual maturity to handle it. Heaven saw every move. Heaven heard every word spoken in secret. Heaven weighed every intent against your purpose. Now the audit is speaking through your outcomes, through separation, through exposure, through the strange loss of confidence in those who mocked your silence. through the return of peace in your body, through the return of clarity in your mind, through the return of authority in your voice. Chosen one, all they ever tried to do was to shut down a divine frequency. All they did was to trigger a heavenly audit. All they tried to do was to drown out your voice in noise. But that noise is now your evidence. They tried to use darkness to mess you up, but darkness had to account for what it carried. They tried to make your voice a problem, but heaven made it proof. Go forward clean. Speak only when you have been released. Keep your peace guarded. Stay away from rooms where your spirit had to shrink in order to exist in. The next chapter does not require you to argue with people committed to misunderstanding you. The next chapter requires you to remain in alignment long enough for your life to continue testifying. If this message touched your spirit, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone whose testimony has been muzzled by other people. Comment below and say, "The audit is speaking." Stay grounded, stay protected, and stay discerning. The truth that heaven put in you was never meant to be governed by fear, interrupted by darkness, or tampered with envy. Your voice is still alive. Your assignment is still moving. And the very frequency that was sought to silence you is now returning with evidence, authority, and divine fire.